All right, welcome back to episode 91 of Inspiration Contagion. This week, I have a really special guest with me. I was actually on his podcast recently. He's the founder of the Gathering the Kings, just Gathering the Kings, not with a the in the front of it. Chaz Wolfe is a high-performing serial entrepreneur who's on a mission to ignite entrepreneurs to create and live the exceptional life. He has built, purchased, and sold multiple seven-figure ventures in franchising, home service, real estate, and consulting. Chaz is a studied and accomplished professional who values discipline and integrity. He's an operations and process maximizer and an award-winning sales and business mind. Chaz is known to push the limits of excellence, mindset, and results. We like that here on Inspiration Contagion. And as a dynamic leader, facilitator, and speaker, he has helped both domestic and international organizations achieve massive levels of growth in all areas of life. With that, welcome, Chaz.
Holly Jean, thanks for having me. Let's push some limits, huh? Let's do it.
I like it. So we were just talking before we got on here about how we're both standing for this podcast interview. And apparently on Chaz's last call, he was walking with his new desk treadmill. So if we're a little fired up, a little pumped up, don't be surprised.
Yeah.
And if you're watching the video, you'll be very entertained, I'm sure, because we're both energetic people.
Yeah. And you might see I'm pitting out, so you just never know, when you when you got a lot going on in multiple businesses, it's always better just to keep rolling and go fast.
I love it. All right. Well, with that, we're going to dive right in. I want to hear, what does this Chaz, this inspirational leader, what makes you an inspirational leader, or what is your secret sauce, especially since you run so many businesses?
Well, okay. So the secret sauce to being an inspirational leader, is that the question?
Yes.
Well, I think that there maybe is two layers. The initial layer is that in order to impact others, you have to first impact yourself. And so I think I am just a student of self. I'm a master of my own domain, and I understand how to influence and control myself and my environment. And so because I'm able to do that, and of course that's a daily thing that I continue to do, I'm then able to have even an impact towards other people. I think that the mix that I like to throw in there is like humility, because man, who am I to say I'm an influential leader? Who am I to inspire others? I don't know, but I do have a story. We all have a story. And I think that there are people who need to hear my story. And some of those things I've overcome. Some of those things have been challenges. Some of those things have been rock star moments, but they make my story. And I think that someone somewhere is going to be inspired by it. So I just keep on telling it.
I love it. That is such a great reminder that if you want to have an impact on others, you have to first have an impact on yourself. And I'm not really a Bible quoter, but this is just reminding me of like that Bible verse of like, how dare you point out flaws in others if you haven't started to like work on those flaws yourself.
That's right.
That's what was coming to mind as you described that is, if you haven't worked on something yourself, why would you be asking for that thing in someone else, like on your team or one of your clients?
That's right.
And so I think what makes people inspirational leaders is, like you said, they're those constant students. They become experts in those specific domains, which you have quite a few from your intro. And so why don't you really quick share your story kind of high level before we continue on with our questions? So I think that'll be really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, high level, I grew up in a single mom household. And that meant that financially we weren't in a super great position, but from a support and a grit and a let's figure things out in life perspective, man, I was wealthy and had all kinds of good stuff being poured into me. And played basketball through high school and even into a little bit of college. Played pretty high level, not a high level in college. Let me just clear the road there. But I did play high level until college. I did play a little bit in college, and then really decided at a pretty young age that I was about my future, and I didn't see basketball in that future. What I saw was, a family, getting married and a family, and impacting others. Of course, doing business. I didn't know what that really looked like, but it started off in sales, and I got married young. In fact, we met in high school, and I was trying to scoop her up before she even graduated, but I knew that wasn't like a thing. So I made sure she graduated, and then I swooped her up. But like literally, I proposed when she was 18. I was 19. We were married at 21 and 20. And I just have always been determined. I've been not necessarily clear, like knowing exactly to the detail of what I want. I'm always trying to fill in those details. But if you want to describe that individual, it was, okay, no, I knew what I was going for generally, and I was going hard, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me. And even so much so to where I knew that I wanted to marry her. I knew that I was going to do business in some regard. And really what that meant for me was helping people, because before even business, I thought maybe I'd be a youth minister. And this idea of discipleship and just helping others is really core to who I am. And that probably comes from a single mom family and seeing her like give her life literally for my sister and I. And so, yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. We do have multiple companies. Franchising, Edible Arrangements was the brand there. I had 7 locations over 3 states, 65 plus employees. That was all in my 20s. I still own a couple of those. I've exited most of them. We have a couple of real estate companies. We have a construction company. Gathering the Kings is a peer-to-peer mastermind. Of course, we've got a podcast, like you mentioned. We got all kinds of stuff going on, and it keeps me young. I love
it. I love it. Some of the core things that I think I've heard consistently from many of the really amazing, inspiring leaders in my close circle and that we brought on the podcast is this kind of very interesting, rich experience at a young age where they're called to be of service, right? They want to make a difference in the world, whether it's with business or giving back to their community, like you mentioned, youth ministry. And that's kind of interesting. We didn't talk about this on your podcast, but when I was in college and maybe between college and grad school, I worked for youth ministry. I did volunteer work for a children's ministry at a church. And so I think that what's really fascinating to me is many entrepreneurs have that heart of service,
it. Yeah,
especially the entrepreneurs that are trying to do socially conscious things with their companies is kind of their North Star.
totally.
So one of the questions with that I want to ask you to dial in a little bit further before we get into our peak performance questions is, what does inspiration mean to you, to Chaz?
Yeah, I just imagine, I'm laying here or standing here for that matter. I don't really care. Hook me up to the IV, just like right here, just hook me up. Call it inspiration, call it courage, call it motivation. Maybe it's a mixture of all three. I want to believe. And in order to believe, often for most people, it's a rarity that you just have the courage or strength on your own to just believe. It can happen. I've had moments of that for myself, but for the most part, as humans, when I see or when I hear, I'm like, oh, I now believe because I got to experience it. And if Holly Jean can do it, then I can do it. Or if Chaz can do it, I can do it. Or whatever the scenario is. And maybe it's not a scenario of like they've done something, but I saw it happen. And I believe that I can either do it or have it or be it, whatever it is. The point is that I now have raised my belief. And I cannot really truly change my actions, which then obviously give me the results that I'm looking for or that I say that I want, unless I first go all the way back to the origin of that and change my beliefs. So for me, when you say inspiration, I'm like, yeah, hook me up. Like put a double shot, one in both arms, inspire me, because that encourages belief. And then, of course, when I have belief, I'm going to take high doses of action. When I take action, of course, I'm going to fail sometimes, but I'm going to get some results. The results are going to further my inspiration and my belief, and I'm going to take even more action. I'm going to start getting more results. And you get far enough down that road where, inspiration never gets old, but you no longer need the hookup to keep going, even though you're still a junkie. I'm still a junkie. Give it to me,
Oh, I love it. I love it. Yes. What this kind of brings to mind too is if you look back at, your success of 10, where you are today and 10 years where you were before,
Yeah.
And you look at how you got there, how you gained that belief, it's from mentors and coaches and masterminds and peer business owners that you were able to lean on and gain knowledge from.
Yeah.
And also what comes to mind kind of recently that, in the future, if you listen to this, it will be dated. But Ted Lasso, his coaching in that show and how he has that believe sign. I believe sometimes that we need to borrow belief from
Oh
others.
yeah.
And like you were sharing, you hear a story. Maybe you're listening to this podcast interview right now and you're in a phase or a fork in the road and you're kind of questioning your belief. What I would highly recommend is listen very carefully as I share this. I cannot tell you how many small moments where I started to question believing in growing this business or doing whatever the next thing was that I went after. The difference is I never went down the storyline
Mm,
of that false belief and that false thought.
yeah.
But that doesn't mean we're not human. I'm sure Chaz has moments where he's like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But the difference is the longer you build that strength of inspiration and belief and taking action, regardless of even falling on your face, you get stronger and stronger. And you can put that old storyline, that old limiting belief, that old fear in the back seat and be like, you're old, Holly, you're old, Chaz, you're old news.
That's right.
And I'm not letting you take over the steering wheel. So that's the difference.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Now I want to talk about peak performance because you're clearly an expert at this.
Well,
You got married young, you have all these businesses that have been highly successful. How do you define peak performance and how did you arrive at that definition for yourself?
yeah, well, I love peak performance, and to me, that just means the culmination or the ultimate, the top. And I think that there's a distinction here that we both have to not only recognize. I know we both agree to it, but just for the audience's perspective, is that peak that we're talking about doesn't actually exist, right? It's the upward trajectory towards the peak that actually exists. And I know that we both believe that, and we even help other people in their journey on that. But the the acknowledgement of that, and then also how you go about your peak performance should, and for me, is rooted in that, which means this. Okay, you say I'm a high performer, peak performer, I've got all this stuff. And it's like, well, the truth is that some of those things have worked out really well. A lot of other things haven't worked out really well. And so maybe all the cool things that I've done that haven't worked out really well are on the website that you just read, which is fantastic. But all of it together makes the story or the journey, the upward trajectory to the peak performance. And so there's a bunch of things that I've learned not to do. There's a bunch of things that I've learned to do. And I understand that I'm on this journey of continuing to press into the things that work and remove the things that don't. That to me is peak performance. I call it winning in all areas or creating and living the exceptional life. Well, how do I create and live the exceptional life? Well, you got to win in all areas. Well, okay, so now we're in this loop. Create, live the exceptional life, win in all areas. What does that really mean? It's that I'm on the journey in all these areas of life. For me, it's business, it's finance, it's marriage, it's family, it's faith, it's fitness, it's lifestyle, it's joy, like all these things. And how do I win tactically, practically today, this week? Maybe I'm not a 10 yet, but if yesterday or last week I was a 4 and today I'm a 5, I'm winning. It's the journey. That's what peak performance is that I'm moving that way toward the quote unquote place that I'll never be. And I'm okay with that because I know that, I think actually it was Matthew McConaughey that says his mentor or his hero is himself 10 years into the future. And he's always trying to chase that version of himself. And he knows he's never going to meet him, but he wants to. So he's going to keep trying, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I constantly try to remind my clients and myself of is that, we grew up in a society that's highly competitive and comparative. And the only person you should really be comparing yourself to is yourself and defining success on your own terms. So instead of what Matthew McConaughey is doing in 10 years, like, yeah, that's your hero. But I would also say, measure your success backwards. Look at where you were 10 years ago, 3 years ago, 3 months ago, and how much you've grown
Totally.
so that you can celebrate the journey.
Yep.
Because like you said, that ideal of in the future, that peak, your ideals are ideals for a reason. There's always room for growth. So
Yeah.
stop chasing the ideal. So with that, I want to hear you kind of mentioned this on the side a little bit, but what are some of the big challenges and obstacles that you face along your journey to describing that place of peak performance and winning in all those areas?
Yeah. Well, I think probably all of the things that come to my mind quickly all fit into one bucket, and I'll just name it intentionality. And so, in my business or in my finance or in my marriage or with my children or in my health physically or emotionally or in my lifestyle or all these things I've just mentioned. when I can, one, be clear, and two, belief, three, then take action, all those things to me equal intentionality. So I've defined first what I want. What does winning look like for me? Okay, great. That looks like X amount of profit or X amount of money invested or X amount of passive income. That looks like X amount of, joy and fulfillment in my marriage, or, it looks like X with my children. Okay, fine. So I've defined it. I'm clear. Then it's like, okay, well, how do I move forward on that and take actions with my belief and the intentionality of just the little pieces every single day? So I've thought about what I want. I've broken down how I can actually go do that. And I believe that I can. I want to go do it. So I've got desire and belief mixed together, and then I'm taking action. That's the simplest form of me now starting to see the results of, every single morning at 5 a.m. I send my wife an affirmation text, and it's specific and individual from the day before, usually. And I'm intentional. I take a couple of minutes and I'm like, okay, what happened yesterday that I'm super grateful that she did either for me or for our children, or I got to witness her in the midst of something. And I'm going to affirm her right now, 5 a.m. every single day. It happens like clockwork. I have a reminder on my phone even. And these things are intentions. I had to first think about it though. I had to first think, what can I do every day to build Julie? So hopefully that I give kind of multiple angles to this answer here, but it's intentionality in every single area.
Yeah. And I think maybe some folks, the challenge that they have is, instead of thinking about what you need, think about what you want. That's a very huge distinction. What do you want? And you don't need to ask anybody's permission to want what you want. You want and desire what you want and desire, and that's it. So, but what Chaz also mentioned is specifically what success looks like with that want and desire. That's so important. That's why for me, visualization every single morning is something I have to do, or I get to do, because it helps me have that intentionality for the day. And one thing I want to share with folks, because my second book is one of the pieces is on clarity. And it's ironic when you tell the universe you're writing a book on clarity, life is like, let me throw you so many curveballs to make things really unclear.
Totally.
And what I have learned is that clarity is a muscle, and it is something that, because we are constantly changing and life is constantly changing, to have that intentionality, you have to check in with yourself constantly, because otherwise that clarity, like you said, you have kind of your North Star that doesn't really pivot, but then the details can change. Right. And giving yourself permission to change your mind on the journey is so important. I just want to share that because it's been a really hard lesson I have learned this year. Yeah. And if anybody needs to hear that, just that was what was coming to mind as you shared that.
Yeah, that's good.
Now I want to pivot a little bit. How have you created a culture of peak performance in your companies?
Yeah, well, this could go companies and or in the family, really wherever you go. First off, I'm defining what does peak performance look like for me. We've talked about that. Now I can get nitty gritty on that all the way down, and they should. The audience should get nitty gritty on what is excellence, or what is winning, or what is success. What does peak performance look like? And then, in essence, that becomes now a standard. Now, I'm going to encourage the listeners to have some EQ with this, with their team or with their spouse or with their children, because just because you have an enlightenment to a new standard doesn't necessarily mean that someone else does, especially if you're already in relationship with them and like, ding, this is just something that you thought of and it's now a standard for you. Okay, fine. It's not yet for them. So have a little bit of grace. But my point in saying that is that once we've established the standard, or what does peak performance look like, then it's just a matter of communicating that to then the other people. So in this case, it's my team. If I'm bringing somebody new on, the communication looks like, this is who we are. This is how we operate. This is what this heartbeat sounds like. And if you do that in a intentional way through the hiring process and making sure that you've got even all the way down to the personality assessments and such that we use, then that person knows. I know, they either feel at home or they don't. And every now and then we make a mistake, but for the most part, there's like a bunch of that filtering stuff up front where they've got plenty of chances, to run the other way. And as the entrepreneur who's maybe a little bit crazy, me, of course, not you, not the audience, me, I'll take full responsibility. Okay, fine. But showing that, being honest about that, because working for someone like me is not like working in a big corporate environment where it's just dry and bland and vanilla all day long in your cubicle. And part of that is what's exciting about working for someone like us. So I think that being honest, being open about those things, but being very, very intentional about communicating what those standards are, and then following through once you have those people on your team, or once you've come into an agreement with your spouse. This is now the standard, or this is the agreement that we're in. Okay, fine. We both have to follow through. It cannot just be something that we talked about once and then they never see it again in the office or in your marriage. It's follow through at that point, which again is intentionality.
Yeah, it's a really good reminder. Just because you arrive at something that becomes a new standard personally, integrating that into a culture when it's going to be a change in standards is very different than when you're hiring somebody and saying, these are our standards. This is what our mission and vision is. These are the things we've hired for.
Yep.
Is this a fit or not? And that's a really important distinction that nobody's really brought up yet on the podcast. So I totally agree. And this really applies to your personal relationships. Just because you have this huge aha moment, you're like, oh, this is my new standard, my new vibe. You cannot assume that your partner, your friends, your community, your employees are going to immediately adopt that. You need to have some conversations and, like you said, some EQ around that.
Yeah.
I also love how you need that intentionality with hiring. I recently brought a new person onto the team, and one of the things I always have them do is read the gap in the gain.
Oh yeah.
Because when we're measuring our success and our progress, we're always measuring backwards. We want to see how far we've come. We want to celebrate our accomplishments, and we want to learn from the areas where we might fall on our face and look at that as a gain versus a gap. And that's a huge mindset thing that's super important for our performance. And so having that intentionality, sharing the impact that they have with their role, and then defining those new standards in a way that allows for adoption is really, really important.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you separately, how have you optimized your customer experience, staying on the peak performance train or anything
Yeah.
else that comes to mind?
Yeah. Well, first off, I try to love people well. And so that sounds maybe like, oh yeah, of course. And it's like, no, seriously. Like my franchise, Edible Arrangements, it's a gift business, and we make physical products out of fruit and treats and brownies and all kinds of fun stuff. But what is that experience from the order all the way to the delivery to the consumption of that chocolate dip strawberry, all the way over to a construction project where we're doing a high end bathroom and they've chosen us, and we were probably 25% more in price because we painted the picture of maybe a stress-free experience, or that we have, this valuable team, that we're experts and that it's going to be beautiful, or we're going to be able to do, a unique piece in the bathroom, or, whatever the scenario is. That's because if you see people, humans, like I see through my screen, through Riverside, and I see Holly Jean, and I'm like, wow, there's a human there. She was created by the same creator that created me. Wow, this is incredible. And that, I know that sounds a little bit maybe out there, but it actually for me is so baseline. It's like, do you love well? And if you love well, then I can practically and process wise build on things. I'm going, okay, so when someone calls the store, what do we sound like? What's the script? Okay, fine. What's the experience that we want to deliver? Okay, when we make the product, or with Gathering the Kings, when someone joins our mastermind group, they're after living and creating the exceptional life, winning in all areas. What does that look like? Well, we got to probably figure out like where they are now and where they want to go, and who do they need to meet inside the community, and how do we facilitate those connections, and are they scheduled for the next call, the next roundtable, and is that easy for them to like just slip right in, or do we make it difficult? Do they have to go here and click that and there? And all of those pieces are super, super practical. For me, the baseline is, do you just love other people well? And if so, then you'll press into or obsess, like Jeff Bezos talks about, over that client journey. And literally every single little touch point along the way can be defined. You can assign it to somebody on your team. They can own it. They can already like take your idea and then like really start to break it down and go, okay, well, this is how we make it even better and better and better and better. And if you do that, even though you still make mistakes, it will continue just to blow people's minds.
I love this. We are speaking the same language, and it's so interesting. It comes down to such clear and simple principles. You just love people, right? So when you think about the end-to-end experience you're delivering, whether it's a service, a product, a solution. You're supposed to be doing this in such a way that ideally you delight your customers. You don't just solve the problem, they're delighted to work with you.
Yeah.
And for me, when I'm working on customer experience, whether it's podcast guests or people speaking as panelists for my monthly event, or people that are clients for consulting, or when people hire me as a professional speaker, I try to have the most high touch, intentional, and delightful experience I possibly can deliver. And I truly mean that. I have a lot of special touch points that are really unique, and people are like so surprised. They're like, "Oh my gosh, like I feel so seen and heard." And it's so simple. Ultimately, your customers, your clients, your prospects, they want to feel seen, heard, and understood. That's your job. And how you do that, you love them. You obsess about their experience. You want them to come back. You want them to refer you. You want them to think of your company, yourself as a friend because you care that much.
Yeah.
It's so important. I love this.
Yeah, I just posted on social, just real quick here. I got a story from this morning.
Yeah.
Actually, I had a client that he called me last week, or actually it was the week before. He's like, "Hey, we got to go to breakfast. I have something for you. I don't want to ship it to you." I'm like, "Okay, weirdo, but sure, let's go to breakfast." So there's a couple clients. We all go for breakfast this morning, and he brings. I've got it here on my desk. I'm going to show you. He brings this. I don't know if this is Zeus or it's a king on a throne. Okay, let's just say that because that's what he thought. But he literally was just in Greece, and he saw it. This thing is like, I don't know, 10 pounds maybe. It's like heavy. It's like real deal. He bought it from Greece, and he brings it all the way back, and he's like, "Man, I thought about you." And it's like, you don't you don't have clients that do crazy stuff like this unless he has just really felt like, dude, we are in this thing and we're friends now. Like, it's not just he's my client or I'm his client, because I've done business with him too. It's like, it goes beyond that. He
Yeah.
knows that if he needed something with his two daughters today, right now, in the middle of this podcast, he could text me and be like, "Dude, I need you." I'd be like, "Holly Jean, I got to roll. I'm sorry." Because it becomes more than that.
Yeah. And that's, I have so many of my clients, and this is why I had to leave corporate America, because they have all these lines and rules and boundaries that didn't work for me. And it felt gross because honestly, my clients are really close friends of mine because when I work with my clients, it's a partnership. I am invested in their success. And so, of course, we become friends. Like, I'm not hiding what's happening in my life. I'm very authentic. So, all right, well, we could talk about this for days because we have so much in common here, but we're going to switch and talk about revenue. Okay. Everybody likes the show me the money part.
That's right.
So, I want to ask you, when have you left money on the table and what did you do to fix it?
Good question. I think that there's like 3 or 4 things coming to my mind. I'm trying to. Okay. Let's go back to the client experience because, I had a scenario, new construction company, we went, 0 to 7 figures in 7 months, and like, from all intents and purposes, super successful. But on the inside, when you go 0 to 7 figures, whatever it takes, 7 months or 7 years, that process, 0 to 7 figures, is figuring things out, creating SOPs, kind of figuring out your brand and your message, and really what is it that you do well for people, dialing in the client experience, and just trying to hit the repeat button without making too many mistakes. And I think that even though we had the revenue 0 to 7 months, 7 figures, the client experience, although I'm super heightened on it, it was fractional at that point because you can only do so much so fast. And, the ideas were there. The concepts of taking good care of people are there. But especially in remodeling where there's high touch and high pickiness and demands and all that stuff actually has become now what we're good at because we've leaned into it. But when you're new and you're still trying to figure those things out, and even now I'm sure that there could be a mistake this week, but the revenue or the money left on the table was, not being able to just do it fast enough. I knew what we needed to do. It's just a matter of it took time. And so once we got that sorted out, and once we got it maybe more smoothed, because it was always there, we always had the right intentions, but you're moving so fast, especially 0 to $1 million in 7 months. There's a lot of things going on and balls get dropped. And so once you figure things out, you hire the right people, you put things in the right place, things are documented properly, then it's like, now we just need to follow the formula. So we try not to leave too much money on the table from that regard. But I mean, there's a couple projects where, like we had to keep going back, and, like it just, maybe a sub that we used didn't do quality work, and we burned through the entire project spend plus 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 plus. And sometimes those are great lessons, because although expensive, we remember them.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean you're not perfect, Chaz?
I'm really trying hard over here, Holly Jean. But I think it is actually an important message, because even though
It
someone
is.
like you or someone like me maybe has the client experience gurus, and they've got it dialed in, and I would say for the most part we do. But like, if you're obsessing over it, that means that you fully recognize that even though it might be dialed in, that there's still mistakes, that there's still a possibility for gap. There's still these
Yeah.
things, and that's okay. We're humans, but let's keep
Yeah.
getting it better too.
Oh, trust me, even with my assistant recently, she's new, and I love working with new people because they always can find things that you could do better.
Oh
That's
yeah.
why you hire them, right?
Yep.
And she pointed out a couple ideas, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
How have
And
I?
she's already started to say, we're leaving money on the table here. And I'm like, I love you.
Yep.
This is so great. So I love it. I don't look at that as, like a loss. It's exciting. I'm like, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for seeing that. So now we can fix it. We already plugged that hole, and
Yep.
that's what we do. We plug the profit leaks, and they're always there. Nobody comes on the show and, if they say there isn't, they're not lucid.
Yeah.
They're dreaming. Chaz, one of my favorite questions to ask everybody on the show is, what is the next shiny object that you want to turn into a revenue stream?
Well, I was just on a podcast 2 days ago, on my podcast actually, and I was hosting a guy who's exited 2 AI companies, and the project that he's working on now has to do with building AI agents. And this is if this podcast is heard in 10 years, this is going to be incredible for that listener, because they're going to be like, oh my gosh, he was talking about agents back then. Wow, this is crazy. But companies that have 100 people now will be soon able to be run by 3 humans and 97 agents. And don't go iRobot on me over here, Holly Jean, but it's kind of like that a little bit. And it's coming. We already know this about AI. And so there was some cool stuff that we talked about how, not having to do with his business specifically, but some supporting things around him that he's already starting to get inquiries about. And I'm like, ooh, I do that really well. I know a couple people, So.
Oh my goodness. I hear you 100%. It's interesting. I'm actually partnering with a company called Podcast AI, and we are helping them get more clients, and we're helping them with their customer experience right now. What's really exciting though and cool is, what it's like running a podcast. You have your podcast. Wouldn't it have been nice 7 years ago if there was this magical AI platform that named your show,
Right.
did the show notes for you,
Right.
did all the chapters for you, found the top 10 viral moments automatically,
Yeah.
created social posts that you can take, then posted it to YouTube with all the right metadata,
Right.
and hosted your site in one place? Like,
It was a good commercial.
Yeah, that would be really.
You should clip that and send that over to him. Yeah.
No, my point is not for that. Like,
Yeah.
my point is AI, because I've been working with AI since, before I started my own company, when I worked in corporate technology.
Yeah.
So AI has been around for a long time. We're just starting to see the power of it because people are less afraid of it. And even if you are afraid of it, it's coming. Like,
Yeah.
It's very useful. It's very helpful. And for people, I hear this all the time, people worried about losing their job. And even companies that want to white label or use, for example, Podcast AI, it's not about, displacing your video editing team or displacing your assistants. It's about being able to do high touch things to obsess over the customer experience versus the repeatable things that nobody likes to do, which should actually help you with your employee retention, your customer retention. Like, this is all good stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. Keep me posted on what you're doing with the AI agent side. Maybe we'll have some magic and fun there together.
Yeah. Yeah. The podcast AI is an agent. In essence, what you just did for someone like myself potentially is you take a look at our team and I go, okay, well, I got this person, that person, and that person, and they all make up everything that you just said. It's like, not that I'm necessarily looking to get rid of jobs, but I'm also looking to run and streamline businesses. And inevitably what happens with this company that you're talking about, and or just agents in general, is that price comes down for the consumer, because that cost of that software is going to replace 3 people on my team, and therefore why wouldn't I do it? And then now I can bring down not necessarily the cost of listening to my podcast, but the cost of whatever else is associated to that, and that dramatically impacts our economy.
Yeah, no, it's really positive for the economy, and it just helps, people do more for their clients in a less stressful way, which is very exciting.
Yep.
All right, Chaz, we're going to wrap up with 2 quick rapid fire questions, and then we'll let our listeners get back the gift of time. All right, what is the best one piece of advice that you would share with others today?
People do what they want to do. And I've heard that for many, many years. As simple as that sounds, there's things that we say that we want. There's things that we might find ourselves repeating over and over, but nothing is really happening. And the truth is that it's not something that we really want. We don't really, 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 really want it, because people do what they want to do. And so when you just settle in on that, you start challenging the things that you say that you want, and they start matching up with your intentionality and your beliefs, and so that the right actions that happen, so that way you start getting the things that you say that you want. Otherwise, stop saying it, because you don't really want it.
Wow, that was like a really deep philosophical thing where I'm going to have to seriously meditate on that. Whoa, my mind is kind of blown right now, but it's so true. I totally agree. Okay. What is the legacy you wish to leave behind?
Oh, you sure I only get a rapid fire answer on this? Okay, so
Nah, take your time.
here's the legacy of Chaz Wolf. I'm creating assets, or I'm building assets and people. My family is on one side of that, where I have a 100-year plan, where my children and my grandchildren will not just have physical monetary wealth, but they will have knowledge. They will know what to do with resources, not just even money, but resources and people, and how to inspire and carry on our family mission. And hopefully somewhere in that 100 years, one single individual says, you know what, I'm going to carry it for the next 100 years. On the business side, it's the yes, I'm building businesses, but I'm also still building people over there, business disciples. And I've got multiple businesses, and there's other business owners that I'm helping. And the ripple of impact there, whether it be in my own businesses or whether it be in other businesses that I'm impacting through Gathering the Kings, I get to influence that individual. And then they get to influence their kingdom, just like I express that I'm influencing mine. And so it's deep for me. It's literally why I wake up. I really don't care about much else, but I have to figure out how to finally bring that into my daily actions. And I go, okay, well, I guess I'm going to get on a podcast with Holly Jean today, because that's going to serve my purpose somehow, some way, to impact other people, build assets and people. Here we go.
I love it. We're building kingdoms with massive ripple effects. I hope you are feeling the inspirational energy and belief and excitement and motivation from Chaz. He's incredible. His podcast is delightful. I highly recommend you check out Gathering the Kings. It is really special. Also, I will have all of the ways you can follow Chaz, get in touch with Chaz. His podcast will be there. All of his social links will be there. His website will be there. So be sure to check that out in the show notes or on YouTube if you're watching us, because we're doing a lot of movements and facial expressions. So you might want to go there.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, listeners. And thank you so much, Chaz. Any parting words of wisdom before we wrap up?
The parting words of wisdom are, if you're still listening to this 45 minutes in or whatever, then that means you really value Holly Jean. So I want you to just take 2 seconds, leave her a 5-star review on Apple, or subscribe to that YouTube channel, because the work that she's doing, not just in her coaching business, but through this podcast, interviewing people like me and bringing it to people like you, is not just something that just happens. It takes work. It takes intentionality. And if you've gotten value in this episode or any of the others, give that replacement, give that reciprocity back to her through a 5-star review on all of the platforms.
Aw, thanks, Chaz. I appreciate it. Ditto. Heart center here. Oh my goodness. All right, listeners, we hope that you got some nuggets of wisdom, some ninja tips, and that you take action that matches the size of your dreams, because like Chaz said, mind blown, you do what you want. So do that and stop saying you want it if you don't really want it. Walk the talk. All right. We'll see you guys next on the next episode of Inspiration Contagion. Thank you so much.